Hi, I'm Peter White, and I've just been asked to say something about listening well. And I'm going to take it in 3 stages: the before we start, the during the time when you're listening to a person, and the afterwards. And we have it in mind, especially in regard to the work of Under the Rainbow. So if we start with the beforehand, I've just got 3 notes to sound, and the first of these is humility. Quite a few of us are going to try and be kind listeners, are going to be men, and we have absolutely no idea what it feels like to have a person living inside you, part of your own body, whom you're beginning to love, and maybe even Psalm 139 with the thought in your mind, Lord, when I was being formed in the inmost parts, the days allotted to me were known by you. There's such significance to this tiny person who's within you, and this is something that mere men really cannot understand. And it's right that we approach this whole listening time with a genuine measure of humility. We don't know what it is like to feel like, for example, when you've lost blood, sometimes quite a lot of blood, at a time when pregnancy hormones are doing terrific things to your thinking and your emotions. We never listen as experts. It would always be an absolute disaster to say, I know how you feel. And it is right to come to such a listening time feeling our own ignorance. My first note is humility. My second word or title is homework, if possible. It isn't always going to be possible, but probably in circumstances like this, there is going to be time to understand. You don't want to use the word miscarriage if a stillbirth has occurred. They are different orders of pain, I think, even, and it's right to understand the situation the person is in. If you've done your homework, you will have some perception of the terrific confusion at the point where birth and death are meeting at the same time. For some women, the sense of failure, I've let this little one down, my body hasn't done what it should have in regard to them, or I've let my husband or myself down. The question often arises of, can I see and hold the baby? And the medical team isn't always sensitive to that. The disposal of the body. A girl I was reading about just in the last 10 days said, I suddenly wondered, where's my baby gone? Probably to the hospital incinerator, and I don't even believe in cremation. Is our baby in heaven? Do I want this little baby baptized? The issue that friends often avoid the subject when they meet you in the street. It's understandable, but it's painful. Doctors making light of it and saying, well, don't worry, you're young enough to have another one. Doing the homework so that we're ready for the kinds of things which arise if we are engaged in kind listening with somebody who's been through this. Humility, homework, and the third one for a Christian pastor is obviously prayer. My conscious decision before going through that door or opening that door to welcome somebody is to say something like, Lord Jesus, I don't know how to deal with this situation, but you do. I haven't got the skills, but you have. I can't get inside this person and be of significant help, but you can. And I pray you, even as you and I go hand in hand into this encounter with a person in whom you are already at work, will you please make yourself a blessing even through failing me? So humility and homework and prayer ideally take place beforehand. And then, again, I have 3 titles for the time of listening. I actually wrote them down, just the 3 headings on a piece of paper at a time when I was seeing students one after another in sort of quick 45-minute spells, and it got so tiring, I just wrote down the 3 words, and they are interest, and liking, and empathy. And I'd like to say just a little bit about each. Real listening involves that you are extremely interested in this person, and that takes intention. It takes the decision to be interested. I had a good friend quite a few years ago. We met quite frequently, and he would say nearly every time, "Peter, how are you?" And I would start to tell him because I was kindly asked. And in about 2 seconds, I noticed his eyes glazed over and he was looking in other parts of the room. And it was perfectly obvious. Maybe I was boring, but it was perfectly obvious he wasn't taking a blind bit of notice. And I was tempted sometime to say, "You obviously aren't listening to a word I say, and what's more, I don't think your wife dresses very well," and just to see if he'd noticed. But that sort of skewing of the eyes, showing that you're not interested, is obviously something to avoid. And if we're going to listen well, it does involve setting aside our own inner conflicts and our own preoccupations of that moment and concentrate on this person with their unique circumstances, pains and joys. Ready, if you're interested, just to wait, not to jump in with your own words, but if there's a time of silence when they are trying to put their thoughts together, you don't jump in, you wait for them to say that. Likewise, if there are tears, that's perfectly all right. It's not something to worry about. It's a good, healthy, normal thing, and let the tears happen and don't rush in. There is a skill, in fact, I'm just going to list the textbook letters to the sort of micro skills of listening. Not that you hold them in the front of your mind all the time, but it's SOLER. S for square on really just means if you're really listening to a person, it's not best if your body is facing the other direction as though you'd really rather be having a cigarette outside. So that's the S. Then the O for open. Simply a reminder really that if you cross your legs and you fold your arms, it's kind of showing you're putting a barrier between you and that person, and a certain openness of body position tends to be helpful if you're listening well. The L is for leaning forward. Don't do it too much, and I don't concentrate much on the L myself. The E is for eye contact. For goodness sake, without staring them down, but do at least some of the time look them right in the eye, so that you are showing that you are interested in this negotiation, this conversation, this exploration that you're having together. And then the R is the relaxed. Tenseness can spoil a good discussion, and if Jesus is doing the work, you can relax about whether you're any use. So SOLER. And I suppose there's another bit of skill about this first thing of interest, and that's just the skill in asking open rather than closed questions. Not, are you married, but how are you feeling about this? Could you explain that a little bit further? Is there anything else you'd like to say? The kind of open questions that give the other person just a little bit trigger if they want to say a bit more, rather than just a yes-no kind of question. Personally, at this stage, I usually say, would it be okay if I scribble a word occasionally, because I might otherwise forget something I want to ask you later. And I personally find it helpful to have a pencil and paper with me, although not to use it very much, just to scribble down quick thoughts for exploring if something comes up. So that's real interest. The second one is liking them. Liking the person, if necessary, choosing to like the person. Here's somebody made just like God, made, as we say, in the image of God, with that mixture of feeling, of mind, of emotion, of choice, and unique. When God made them, he broke the mold and has never used it each person special, to come with a sense of awe. Here is a person with whom God is dealing, and let me not get in the way. What a special person. We're lucky to have in my congregation a minister who just delights in you. Everything about him, the smile he gives, the way he says you're a great person, you realize that he likes you, even admires you. And if you can enter that mindset consciously, then it's a blessing to the person you're trying to listen to. I like you. And then the third issue is that of empathy, which is really so different from sympathy. Sympathy is, I'm sorry for you. Empathy is the choice to enter how they feel, so that as they share something amusing, your eyes light up because you're entering their emotional mindset. If they're weeping, it would be extraordinary if tears didn't start to come to your eyes, because you are entering the way they are feeling. You're trying your very best, and it does take work and concentration. You're entering, how are you feeling? And you're able, as this scripture says, to sit in silence and mourn with those who mourn. So I think those are the three titles that I use, especially when tired and if things are happening one after the other, to remind me to listen well, that of interest, that of liking the person, that of empathy. So that's during. And then afterwards, again, just three thoughts. The first is obviously prayer. Lord, whether or not I've messed it up, you're there with that person. You're kind. You love them to bits. You know exactly what's going on in their life. You are well disposed towards them. And I pray you go on ministering to that person. And I would have thought pray in detail, taking some of the things they have said and asking Jesus into each one of those stages in the narrative. So there is to be praying for them. Secondly, there's the question of follow-up, which I think is a wisdom and kindness issue. I remember going to an older minister when I had a particularly difficult person to go and visit, and he listened and made some suggestions, and we prayed together, and then I went over and did that visit, and it went remarkably well. And I found myself wanting to phone him up and tell him how it had gone. And likewise, if that person means something to you, you're bound to say, how's it going now? And to be choosing just with one's own instinct, I think, the periods of time after which just to do a little bit of follow-up and to say how things are going. So there's prayer, there's follow-up, and there's then what I call the year's diary, which, whether it's kind of 12 cards, one for each month, or whether you do it on your tablet or your computer these days electronically, to have the kind of rolling diary that reminds you this is just a year since so-and-so's baby was born dead, and to be sending them a card or to be speaking with them and showing that you remember. And there can be a certain sensitivity to be aware of, which this diary could help you with. For example, you're just about to make an arrangement to baptize another couple's baby, and you realize that's going to take place on the same date as this other person lost their baby a year ago by stillbirth. Either to arrange a different date or to let that mum know so that it isn't a shock, because there's a big difference between celebration and bereavement. So those are my three period of time divisions: the beforehand, the during, and the after. And my final comment would be, never forget, we are our ministry. It's the person you are, whether or not you use exact skills. It's the person we are, whether we are kind or not, whether we delight in people or not, whether we are gentle or not. It is the person that you are in the end that makes what you do minister or not minister. Beforehand, during, and after. But above all, attend to your own heart in relation to Jesus.